We're with Gary, Indiana, and it's August, it's the end of August, whatever the date is, I never know the date.
I don't either.
And we're talking about the bar and Bill Rice, late 70s, early 80s. And you had talked previously about what brought you to New York and a lot about your experience with Bill Rice in particular and how he influenced you and you influenced him. And about the rich, dynamic, creative community that we were part of. So my two questions are, one thing, you talked a lot about Bill's studio. What was it about the bar in particular? Because there are a lot of places to drink, there are a lot of places to hang out. Why the bar? What was it about that community in particular that drew you back over and over again? And the second question is really about the forces that assaulted, that eventually led to its dissolution, or the events, or the force.
Okay, well, the first one was that was a place that people I knew went.
Yes,
obviously. I think it was partly that it was not when it was like 78, let's say.
Right.
It wasn't like parochial gay bar,
Right.
like you would find on the West Side, which at that point I think was like very much a place you'd go in and be all male, leather chaps, colognes. The bar was more, the bar was more of a neighborhood bar, even though it also sort of functioned as a gay bar. Like I was saying, I think I said the last time we talked, Tina Lahotsky would go there before she'd go to the Mud Club at night. Straight people went there. John Lurie used to play pool there in the afternoon. There were, it wasn't a gay bar. And I think we also spoke about the fact that if you wanted to pick somebody up, it wasn't the first place you would choose to do that.
Right.
Because mostly people from the neighborhood went there. There weren't there weren't huge numbers of people in there on any given night who were not there regularly. It was mostly people that were known to each other.
Yeah,
So
actually, you said that you'd kind of know who was going to be there.
Yeah. And what you were saying before, like a little bit earlier this morning, Richard said that there was a kind of language, or a kind of secret language, or a kind of coded language. I think, for me anyway, thinking about that, it was more that we all kind of knew each other pretty well, and we all sort of knew what each other was like, and so I'm thinking, if somebody who was really completely out of our ken came in there, we might find them amusing in a certain way.
Okay.
Because a lot of people would. One thing that I wanted to mention to you the last time we spoke that I forgot to do, I thought this was a kind of significant thing, although how significant I don't know, but when William Friedkin was making the film Cruising,
right,
I think in 1981, I'm not sure, but whenever that was, there were all these demonstrations against the film over in the West Village. I'm not sure why, but there just were. He took over the bar to film for, 2 or 3 days. And he put up all of these, things to make it look like a West Village gay bar. He had he put rows of hubcaps on the wall. You changed things around, and when they were finished using the place as a film set, the people that owned the bar, which was like Sammy and Diane, if I memory serves. I don't know who the fuck they were, but you know, Sammy and Diane, you know, mafia, whatever. They just left everything that way, and that actually changed the whole character of the bar.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, not entirely because the same people went to the bar, but suddenly a lot of people who never went to the bar went to the bar. Became more of a pickup place.
Got it.
Got it. You know, it became more like a West Village bar. I mean, it was something like we were all very disturbed by, you know, because somehow it just turned into it turned into a place that was more like other places than it had been. I'm not saying it changed entirely, but it did change. I mean, that at least is my memory.
But when new people come into any group, it changes things. And if you had an influx of people.
Yeah. I think, but I think that it became much more characteristically a gay bar at that point.
Right.
You know, by this kind of very artificial thing happening.
Well, that speaks to this question about the forces that began to erode that community.
The other thing was, I don't know, I mean, this is a little bit difficult of a subject for me because one of the reasons I was there every night was because I had a drinking problem. You know, I mean, quite aside from La Vida La Boheme and Bill and, you know, having friends there, I mean, it was true that there was a kind of, there were people that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. I mean, Bill, of course, I saw a lot at his home and in the garden and at the studio, but as my life kind of shifted in terms of, you know, where I spent the majority of my time.
The Mud Club thing, you mean?
Well, not so much the Mud Club, but later when I started working at The Voice and I had that to do and you know, just various things, you know, or maybe as my social sphere sort of expanded. I mean, the Mud Club was part of that, but certainly, but also professionally, I was doing other things. I wasn't writing plays or directing them anymore, so I wasn't putting things up in the garden.
Right.
It got so that I could only see Bill, for example, or would normally only see Larry and Richard and a lot of other people at the bar. You know, how things broke up there, I think had much more to do, because I mean, I remember like going to the bar right up into the 90s actually, you know, but then what happened? The Boiler Room opened, so suddenly there was a place where all these like younger people, let's say, went at night. Dick's Bar opened. It had been Jackie Curtis's aunt's or grandmother's bar, and that when Jackie died, and the bar was sold, and this guy who was I don't know, I really thought he was sick. I mean, like weird guy opened Dick's Bar, but I remember being taken there by Ron Vauda the first time I ever went. He said, this guy I know just opened this bar. Turned out it was Slugger Ann's, that was Dick's Bar. You know, the guy that owned that place was a sicko. I mean, I don't remember his name, but
I never went there.
He was a creepy guy. But it did become popular gradually as another place, and you know, Bill that became part of Bill's itinerary, was Dick's Bar.
Right, I remember that. And by the way, Gary, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we all had drinking issues.
Yeah,
we were all putting it away a lot.
A lot, yeah. I mean, it turned out ultimately that I was not an alcoholic, but I, you know, that was what am I saying? That plus drugs was my escape valve.
Right.
And of course, it was the easiest and legal way, and more sociable than maybe a lot of the drugs I was taking. But there was that. You know, always that to remember, because for me, a lot of the sort of not estrangement, but let's say detachment from the scene in the East Village had to do with drinking issues.
Yeah.
Had to do with, you know, I had to get serious about what I was doing in life to make a living, like you said about, you know, becoming a therapist and not wanting to be.
Yes.
You know, and to do, I mean, when I was 20 years old, I could, like, drink all night and go to work the next day or whatever.
Right.
But, you know, when you get older, you can't. You just can't.
Right.
You can't be serious and be intoxicated with one thing or another all the time, or even very frequently. So there was that. I mean,
so that pulled a lot of us away. You know, we had
I think
to
so.
work and have an income and do something that we felt was worthwhile, and we also couldn't get, you know, loaded every night and do that at the same time.
You know, like just trying to be somewhat chronological or historical about it, seems to me, looking back, that things didn't break up all that long ago, because up until, I mean, when the East Village suddenly had this art thing, this art.
Yes. When was that?
That started around 1984 or 5.
I see, okay.
And actually, it didn't impact the real estate values over here until a few years later, I think. It was a gradual thing. I think by the time they started gentrifying the East Village, most of those galleries, if they survived economically, had moved to Soho, and of course now the ones that survived from that are in Chelsea. This was such a dead area. I mean, in terms of, if you compared it to the rest of much of the rest of the city, you know, demographically, the whole city has gotten, you know, grossly overpopulated. But this was a backwater, the same way I suppose there are still some sections of Queens or Long Island City that are backwaters now that would be very desirable to live in if you were, you know, in your 20s or 30s, whatever. So I think that it wasn't until maybe the late 80s that a lot of places started to disappear, like Club 82. The places we talked about, Princess Pamela's. You know, Dick's didn't fold probably until, 12 or 13 years ago, maybe. Eileen's Reno Bar, which once they moved out of that little space between 11th and 12th, moved into a place that's now like the Hungry Poppers, or I don't know what, you know, is a straight neighborhood bar. All those places, one by one, just sort of, you know, slowly disappeared. And so, because that was part of, I mean, that Phoebe's, you know, which, I mean, it's still in existence.
I know, but it changed.
It's changed totally.
Yeah.
Those places sort of constituted, you know, sort of the, what would you call it? I mean, those were
the gathering
places. Well,
places.
yeah, those were the places that if you went there in the evening or at night, you were likely to find people that you knew. And that is like a really something that disappeared elsewhere too. I mean, you know, the people I knew in the art world, the people I knew in a certain other, you know, sphere of the city. You know, once money came into everything, let's put it this way. Once money came into everything, once things became about money, once everything in the city became about money, there weren't places anymore that people just gravitated,
Yeah.
on a regular basis.
Right.
It just slowly evaporated.
Because people had to leave, or because
Because some people got rich, some people didn't. Some people, left town. Some people died. Don't forget,
That's
there was
true.
that as well, and that was a really significant part of that whole story. Was that after a certain moment, people started dying in like huge numbers from AIDS, and that decimated the whole community over here. There's no question about it. I mean, that was maybe the most dramatic thing and the most depressing thing, and also, I think just spiritually, it was just a huge downer for everybody, and I mean, it's hard to reconcile trying to live this artistic life or whatever with the fact that you didn't know if the people you were talking to were going to be alive or dead the next week. I mean,
That's
that
right.
was.
That's right. Well, and it brought a whole different spirit into things. I mean,
Well,
death was everywhere.
Yeah, fear also.
That's
a
right.
lot of fear.
That's right.
And certainly the libidinal drive that was
Oh my God.
behind a lot of the whole scene over here, whether it, concretized in terms of actually having sex with people or just being able to or thinking about it or whatever, that was gone. I mean, it just went. I mean, people were terrified of this thing happening to them, and of course also freaked out and grief-stricken that it was happening to people they knew. And you'd hear things every time you left the house. This one had a seizure down in Chinatown. That one, was carried off by pneumonia over the weekend. I mean, it was like one of those things that was just, I think, really hard to assimilate or to regard as normal in any way at all. It just was not.
It was a trauma to the whole community.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Well, the whole world, actually, eventually. But I remember, I better not say. But I remember one of our, people, one of the people who's now, I don't know, somehow inserted himself into the whole ACT UP history and everything, seeing him in front of the post office on 4th Avenue. Early on the whole thing, and he was moving to Paris. And he said, "I'm getting out of here, this AIDS thing." Well, somehow, the way the history is inscribed now, he was here the whole time, and he was organizing with Larry Kramer and all. I don't know how that happens, but it does happen.
Hopefully it's guilt.
Anyway, that was the other thing. I mean, we all started to. A lot of us started going to the ACT UP meetings and all of that stuff. It became a thing. I don't know how Bill processed all this stuff myself. I don't recall actually. But Bill was quite a bit older than.
He was.
I think Bill was 50 when I met him.
Right. But didn't one of his boyfriends, one of his earliest, most beloved boyfriends die?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was from HIV.
It was, actually.
It was, okay, so. Well, Bill wasn't one to chat about his feelings.
No, he wasn't, actually. No.
One would
Well, that's
never
why I
know.
say I don't know how he processed it because I just don't know. He didn't talk about things like that. Bill, see, the thing, one thing he and I had in common is that we're both New Englanders.
Oh.
Bill much more of a New Englander than I am.
Wow.
Yankee, stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
Not effusive emotionally.
Well, that tells me a lot, because I always thought of Bill that way. That was very much part of his character.
Yeah, and it was very Vermont. I was from New Hampshire, but I was from maybe kind of slightly less, I don't know what the word is, reticent.
Yes, restrained.
Bunch of people.
Yeah.
But I, also, I didn't know how to process all that shit. You know, I mean, between being terrified for your own life and wanting to have empathy for other people. And that was, like, to me at the time, a real struggle, because I decided people are not supposed to die at my age. They're just
That's
not,
right.
you know.
That's
I mean,
true.
and as there was, you know, apparently nothing to be done about it until,
Right.
you know, until Larry Kramer and a bunch of other people decided that, you know, there's a way that we can, you know, actually force the government to put money into research and stuff. And, you know, but I can't say I was that active, much of an activist either. I went to a lot of ACT UP meetings. I went to the March on Washington, all that stuff. But, I mean, it was a very peculiar thing that it like the epidemic brought it gave a lot of people focus that didn't have any. I had plenty to begin with, so, and my focus was never there necessarily entirely.
Never there.
Well, let me put it. Let me. I can give you a good illustration. Mark Harrington, who later, you know, became really a very important activist in terms of, you know, the lobbying the FDA and getting drugs approved and everything else. I mean, really sort of trained himself to be a scientist practically.
Wow.
When I first met him, he was a hanger-on, and the worst kind of hanger-on. You know, the kind of person like Michael Padisano, if you remember him, who would just cling to the edges of groups of people who were friends, you know, hoping for a little snatch of gossip they could carry in their teeth from one group to another, like, you know, like a lamprey or something. I mean, that really, I don't, it's terrible to say of somebody that I now think, you know, turned into a terrific person. And I already knew what I was wanting to do and what I intended to do, or, you know, what I was doing to a limited degree in the early 80s. And so that never became the focus of my attention. Being gay never became the focus of my work. You know, I never, that was not my subject.
Right.
You know, it's sort of, it's sort of like, you know, it might personally be very important to me, might be personally very moving and meaningful to me, but not my subject. Not what I could write about, not what I could make art about.
Right. But you've always had a very broad vision.
Well,
A broad interest.
I would just say that I'm like analytical on a different scale of things, or that sounds condescending. Well, I don't know. I mean, I was trained in school to think about certain things, you know, and that's what I think about.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
You know, sort of a more global perspective on things that maybe a lot of people who find like a particular speciality that, you know, they can.
Well, maybe it's the New England thing, because the gay thing, I mean, for me, my work is very personal. It's very personal. And so, you know, one's sexuality is a very personal kind of subject, and you're thinking about more.
Well, I mean, for me personally, the thing was that it was never an issue for me. You know, it really wasn't. I mean, once I acknowledged that, you know, okay, I'm homosexual, that's it. I'm attracted to men, that's it. The rest is, I mean, I never concealed it in any way whatsoever. It never was an issue for me, except when I was growing up in a small town in New England. It was not really ever an issue after that. But also, it was never, you know, like I could never be in a gay pride parade, for example, because it was not something in my nature that was a source of pride to me, or a source of shame. It was just, you know, what it is. I understand people that, need to affirm themselves in that kind of, very emphatic way because they maybe felt abject before. But
Right.
I always felt abject for other reasons.
Yes.
I mean, I never felt abject about that.
Yes. Wealth distribution, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
You felt very passionately about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The income disparity,
Yes.
Rich and poor, those are things that became very meaningful for me very early.
Yes.
First coming from an immigrant family, but also, I mean, when the years I was in LA, I had every day in front of me this like complete illustration of how capitalism works. I went from, the poorest ghetto in the country every day to the richest suburb in America every night as what I did for a living.
Right.
And so that sort of, I would say, cemented a worldview that I had already formed at university, but and it always seemed to me the basis of everything. I mean, I mean, of course, it's only one way to look at the world, but I have to say, I'm not a sentimental person. I'm not. I don't sentimentalize these things, except of course in my heart I do. But it's those are things that you can analyze in an objective way, and even concretize them in statistics and those. So, and to me that was always important, and that was another reason why, let's say. No, never mind.
That's good. So, last question, unless you go ahead, you can go where you were going.
Well, so we actually kind of answered these questions.
We
right?
have, we have. And just my last thought that comes to my mind is you have prospered and you have kept your art alive. And you are very active, and a lot of people have drifted away, have not prospered. What would you say? Maybe this is a crazy question, but any thoughts on what kind of kept you in the battle for your voice?
I would cast it in totally negative terms. I didn't know how to do anything else.
Okay.
I didn't. I mean, I'm constitutionally incapable of holding a job. I am. I have a really terrible problems with authority, or having a boss, or having anybody tell me what to do. So I had to figure out a way to survive doing what I wanted to do. I know that, I mean, people, but, I don't know, I read this book, or part of this book a few years ago that I want to get a copy of again, called Born Losers, because the premise of it was that the concept of losers, which, I mean, capitalism produces losers in, huge numbers compared to the winners, whatever. But this concept didn't actually exist in America until around the time of Emerson. Like after the Industrial Revolution, it really kicked in, and capital. I mean, I don't know. I'm unsure of that too, because I read a history of the War of 1812 recently, where the guy said that even before the revolution in 1776, a lot of colonists from every walk of life fled to what was called Lower Canada. Actually, it's Upper Canada, but somehow the terminology is reversed, counterintuitive.
Okay.
Because they were disgusted by the greed and the corruption that was already just like everywhere in American life. And I can well believe it. It's just it's become more I think what happened to our community, if you want, I mean, in broad strokes, was that, you know, the force of, you know, deregulation of you know, the safety net being you know, completely unraveled by Ronald Reagan was the real cause of, you know, and you throw in AIDS and you throw in these other things, and how and this ecosystem that was actually very fragile, didn't seem to be at the time, but it actually was, you know, just sort of died.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it definitely, and I saw it in other, you know, other parts of my social existence, you know, you know, just the art world.
So it's not unique to this community at all?
No, I think it was the whole country, but especially Manhattan.
Yeah.
Manhattan, like, most nakedly, because probably this is, along with Los Angeles, I mean, the fulcrum of American capital, you know, and so, well, Washington too in its way, but it became so clear here. So you know, I mean, I would never have imagined in 1979, well, 1980, let's say, or even 85, that one day I repined for my old slumlord that used to own this building, you know?
What happened?
Well, he turned it over to his brother. His brother turned it, when he retired, he turned it over to this really horrifying management company that runs the building now. You know, I mean, and he was a real slumlord, you know, I mean, a classic Jewish slumlord. You know, who just, you know, call him up, oh, I'm not going to do that, I don't have to, you know, whatever, you're responsible for that.
Right.
But, you know, he was somebody that wouldn't throw you out of the lifeboat.
Yeah.
You know, but then that's replaced by this banshee from hell, the woman that works for Cooper Square Realty, who, I don't know what test tube she was developed in or whatever, but, you know, this is somebody that lives to make other people unhappy. God. You know, just like with every breath.
Right.
That, you know,
to get people out.
But it's money. But it's about money. It's about, you know, wiring people. You know, people born after Reagan came into office. I mean, people born in the last 20. They've been taught that money is everything. Everything. Nothing else is important. Personal aggrandizement, personal success, is the only thing that's important. We weren't brought up in that world.
Absolutely not.
So that's what I think really happened, essentially. You know, I mean, I wouldn't want it to be 1979 again, but at the same time, I don't like things the way they are now.
Right.
I don't know anybody that does, except people I wouldn't piss on if their guts were on fire. So, okay, so that's
it, Gary. That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Oh my God.
Thank you for allowing me to avoid work a little longer today.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay.